Maggie Thompson looked down on me for being broke. She thought it would be funny to pull a prank at her birthday party, calling me the maid in front of everyone and posting the video online to humiliate me. But my husband, Jack, was not about to let her get away with it. Hey, y'all, I am gonna call my husband Jack and his mother, Carol, just to keep things simple. I am Rachel, 28 years old, and I have been married to Jack for a little over 2 years now. Jack and I actually go way back. We met in college, where we were just good friends at first. It was not until after graduation that we started dating. We ran into each other at a mutual friend's party, and before you know it, we were together for nearly 4 years, counting the 2 years we've been married. Jack and I are crazy about each other, and I would not trade him for the world. But there is one person I struggle with, and that is his mother, Carol. Now, Carol raised Jack on her own, which is something I respect. She worked hard as a single mom, and I admire that. But man, she is cold and stuck up, and that has made it near impossible for me to warm up to her. From day one, she let me know, plain as day, that she did not approve of me. I suspect a lot of it comes down to my humble background. You see, I was not raised with money. My parents busted their butts to take care of me and my 3 sisters. My dad was a school custodian, and my mom juggled every odd job she could find to make ends meet. We never had much, but you know what? I am proud of where I came from, and so are my siblings. My parents taught us to hold our heads high, no matter what, and to always value hard work. Their jobs might not have been glamorous, but they were honest and noble, and we have always been proud of them. Carol, though? She is one of those people who judges folks based on their paycheck or their title. The very first time I told her that my dad was a janitor and my mom ran errands for a living, I swear, her face twisted like she had just bitten into a lemon. It happened during dinner at her house, and ever since that night, she has made it her mission to remind me that I will never truly belong in her family. She would not say anything directly, but her actions spoke louder than words. She kept her distance like I had some kind of disease, and she would even set out cheaper, plainer silverware for me at her dinner table while she and Jack used the fancy stuff. At first, I thought I was just imagining things and told myself not to make a big deal out of it. But over time, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Carol would give me cheap, thoughtless gifts for my birthday, while spoiling Jack and others with expensive presents. One year, she bought Jack a high-end watch and even sent her assistant on a fully paid vacation to Hawaii. Me? She handed me a knockoff designer purse that probably cost less than a dinner at Olive Garden. That is when it really hit me, this woman did not like me, not one bit. My biggest regret was keeping all of this bottled up instead of talking to Jack about it right away. I had faced my share of discrimination before, but never from someone I wanted to build a future with. Before I saw this ugly side of Carol, I actually looked up to her. Jack used to brag about how she built her own business from scratch, and I thought, wow, this is someone I can learn from. You see, my sisters and I all studied finance, and we worked hard to get through college on student loans. I ended up in marketing and advertising, but my dream has always been to start a business of my own someday. I kept hoping that maybe Carol would warm up to me eventually, but that never happened. I finally opened up to Jack about how I felt a few months after we tied the knot. I told him I hated going over to his mother's house because she always made me feel small, like I did not belong, and I suspected it had to do with my family's background. Jack was great about it. He said he would talk to her and try to smooth things over. And he did. But guess what? It went absolutely nowhere. Carol denied everything, cried her crocodile tears, and played the victim, claiming she had only ever been kind to me. That did not fool me, though it only made me feel like she was trying to manipulate the situation. Afterward, I told Jack that I appreciated his effort, but I still did not feel comfortable being around her. So, we came up with a plan. Jack would keep in touch with her on his own terms, and I would stay away until I felt ready to face her again. He did not cut her off, but he definitely put some distance between them, and boy, did that bother her. Eventually, we settled into a rhythm. I would only see Carol at big family gatherings, and we both seemed fine with that arrangement until a few days ago. Out of the blue, she sent me a text inviting me to her 50th birthday party. She said she wanted me to come by a few hours early so we could patch things up. She even admitted she had been kind of horrible to me in the past and wanted to make it right. I was thrilled, thinking this could finally be the start of a better relationship. So, I went. But when I arrived at her house, she told me to wait in the kitchen. It was weird, but I thought maybe she needed to prepare something before we talked. A few minutes later, Carol walked in, introduced me to the catering staff as her housemaid, and started laughing. And if that was not bad enough, she was recording the whole thing like it was some hilarious prank. Everyone at the party seemed uncomfortable, and honestly, I had never felt so humiliated in my entire life. Tears started streaming down my face, and before I knew it, I had bolted out of the house and into my car. I just wanted to get home as quickly as possible. Earlier, I had texted Jack, letting him know I was visiting his mom, Carol, but he had been tied up at work and had not seen my message. He was not planning to arrive at the party until later anyway. When I got home, the house was eerily quiet, and my phone notifications offered no comfort. I felt completely alone. Overwhelmed, I curled up on the couch and cried myself to sleep. A couple of hours later, I woke up to find Jack sitting next to me on the bed. He was furiously typing on his phone, his face tense with frustration. When I asked him why he was not at the party, he turned the screen toward me, showing me a video. My stomach dropped. It was the recording Carol had posted. She had captioned it, "A prank gone wrong," but it was clear the only thing she intended was to embarrass me. Of course, she had conveniently edited out the part where I broke down in tears, but the whole situation was still humiliating. As I watched, the tears came back. Jack, clearly furious, reassured me that he was doing everything he could to have the video taken down. He promised me that his mother would regret what she had done. Carol, however, was not answering his calls or messages, most likely because she was busy mingling at her party. But Jack knew her well. She would call soon enough to ask why he had not shown up yet. When she finally did call, Jack lived up to his word. I could hear bits of his side of the conversation, and let me tell you, he did not hold back. He called her out for her actions and told her exactly what he thought of her behavior. By the time he hung up, he had promised her that if she did not make amends, he would consider taking legal action against her. After he calmed down, Jack turned to me and apologized repeatedly. He said he regretted not taking my feelings about Carol seriously sooner. Honestly, I could not fully blame him. When I first brought up my concerns, I had downplayed just how much her behavior hurt me. I never mentioned the smaller things she had done, and Jack is not exactly the most observant person. He just had not realized how bad things were. But on the day of the party, when I finally opened up and told him everything, he was livid. He admitted that if I had spoken up earlier, he would have stepped in long ago. I agreed. I should have told him sooner. After that, Jack apologized again, saying he felt terrible for being so unaware. We talked it out, and then Jack called his lawyer. He wanted to explore whether there was a legal way to hold Carol accountable for what she had done. Unfortunately, the lawyer explained that since there were no physical consequences, filing a lawsuit for emotional distress would likely be a waste of time. I told Jack that we should not pursue this any further. Cutting Carol out of our lives seemed like a better option. But Jack did not feel that was enough. He was determined to make her understand that her actions had consequences. I could see how angry he was on my behalf, and while I appreciated his loyalty, I still felt uneasy. The next morning, Jack told me he had contacted Carol and given her an ultimatum. She had 3 days to post a public apology, not just to me, but to my entire family. He insisted the apology had to be in video form. If she refused, he planned to share details of her behavior with her business contacts, potentially damaging her professional reputation. Carol had worked hard to build a name for herself as a successful entrepreneur, but her actions were anything but professional or feminist. Jack believed this approach would force her to take responsibility. Now we are on the second day, and I feel torn. This whole thing feels dangerously close to blackmail. I voiced my concerns to Jack, but he brushed them aside, insisting this was the only way to ensure Carol never repeated this behavior. I am struggling with whether I am doing the right thing by letting Jack handle it this way. Am I in the wrong for allowing my husband to go after his mother like this? Update 1. Hi, everyone. After reading some advice and doing a lot of thinking, I decided to sit Jack down for another talk when he came home from work. I needed to express my concerns more clearly this time. I told him that, while I appreciated him standing up for me, I was not comfortable with his plan to pressure Carol into apologizing. It felt wrong, and I did not want to stoop to her level. I pointed out that even if she did apologize, it would not be sincere. She would only be doing it out of fear of losing her reputation, not because she genuinely felt remorse. I told Jack that an apology like that would not mean anything to me. I told Jack flat out that I did not want him to follow through with this plan. I asked him to call it off and let his mom, Carol, know that there was no need for an apology. She could do whatever she wanted, as long as she stayed far away from us. What surprised me most was that Jack did not push back at all. Instead, he just broke down in tears. It was one of those moments where my heart ached for him. I held him close, consoling him as best I could, until he could finally get the words out about what was bothering him. As some of you might have guessed, Jack was carrying a lot of guilt. He admitted that he had not taken me seriously enough when I first told him about how Carol treated me. And honestly, I can see how that happened. I was so caught up in trying to get her approval, even though she clearly despised me. I kept convincing myself that if I worked hard enough to win her over, she would eventually come around. But when Jack watched that awful video, thankfully now deleted, he finally understood just how deep Carol's hatred ran. That realization hit him hard, and all that guilt started to bubble over. Instead of listening to what I wanted, he channeled it into an over-the-top effort to make his mom pay. By talking things out, we both realized he was repeating the same mistake, not really hearing me. And to be fair, I have always struggled with standing up for myself. I can be pretty submissive and hesitant to speak my mind. But this time, I managed to make my feelings clear. Jack nodded and agreed to text Carol, telling her that he no longer needed an apology. He made it clear that, as far as he was concerned, she was free to do what she wanted, but he did not want anything to do with her anymore. And just like that, it was over. Looking back, I am proud of how we handled it. Jack and I made sure it was us versus the problem, not us versus each other. He cares deeply about me, and I care just as much about him. We have always had each other's backs, but moments like this remind me how important it is to be honest about our struggles. We also realized we need to work on our communication, so we have agreed to start marriage counseling. I have already started looking for someone, and I am hopeful we will begin within the next week. I want to make sure that nothing like this ever happens again. These past few days have been some of the hardest of my life. The humiliation I felt at that party is something I never want to experience again. And while I would never lay a hand on Carol, I would be lying if I said I did not feel the urge to smack that smug look off her face. I will not do it, of course, but I cannot say I would blame someone else for wanting to. Update 2. It has been a week since the party, and Carol has been radio silent. She did not respond to Jack's text letting her know that the apology was no longer necessary, nor did she make any effort to reach out. At first, we thought this meant she was planning something big. Carol is not the type to let things slide. But as the days went by and nothing happened, we started to let our guard down and move on. That is, until today. Out of nowhere, Carol showed up at our house. And she did not come alone, she brought her lawyer. When I opened the door, she barged in without so much as a glance in my direction, acting like I did not even exist. She marched straight into the living room and started calling out for Jack. Now, Jack was in our bedroom, and I was just about to go tell him to come out. But it seems Carol could not even wait a few seconds for me to do that. When Jack finally appeared, she demanded that he sit down. It was infuriating. She was acting like this was her house and she could just boss us around. Jack, though, was having none of it. He told her he was not in the mood to talk and that she needed to leave, lawyer or no lawyer. Carol refused to budge. She insisted that Jack take a seat because he needed to hear this. I could see the frustration on his face, so I told him to just sit down and let her say her piece. The sooner we let her talk, the sooner she would leave. Jack reluctantly agreed and sat down on the couch. I sat beside him, deliberately making it clear that we were a team. Carol ignored me completely and motioned for her lawyer to step forward. The lawyer began reading from some document Carol had prepared. The gist of it was this: Carol wanted Jack to leave me. If he refused, she would cut him out of her will entirely. The document included a detailed list of her properties and assets, as if she was trying to scare him into submission. But Jack was unimpressed. He barely even looked at the lawyer, instead fidgeting with my wedding ring and acting like he could not care less about what was being said. When the lawyer finished, Carol stood there with a triumphant look on her face. She asked Jack if he had thought about what he would do. "If you stay with her," she said, "you can kiss your inheritance goodbye." And that is when Jack did something that caught even me off guard. He stood up, walked over to his mom, gave her a big hug, and said, "Goodbye, Mom." Her face was priceless. She went from smug to absolutely stunned in seconds, and I could not help but laugh. It was the most satisfying moment I have had in a long time. So, after what felt like an eternity of being ignored, Carol finally acknowledged me. But, of course, it was not in a good way. She turned to me, snapped, "Shut up," and began throwing a full-blown temper tantrum. She started hurling insults at me, some of which I would not repeat even to my worst enemy. I decided not to engage. Instead, I sat there silently, pretending I could not even hear her. I knew ignoring her would get under her skin more than anything I could say. Jack followed my lead. As she screamed and cursed, he turned to me and said calmly, "We should go back to our room. This might take a while, and I do not feel like watching her spiral into another meltdown." We both got up, speaking to each other like Carol's shouting was nothing more than background noise. It was obvious our indifference infuriated her. But then, she crossed the line. Carol accused me of being a gold digger. She said she never should have allowed Jack to marry me and claimed I was only after his money. She even took a jab at my dad, calling him a failure who probably could not earn a dime for his family. I felt my blood boil. My dad had worked harder than most people could imagine to give us the life we had, and I was not going to let anyone, especially Carol, disrespect him. Still, I kept my voice steady and told her, "If I were a gold digger, Jack would not be rejecting you and all your money right now. I work hard for my living and have never taken a cent from Jack. You have no idea what you are talking about." Then, I pointed to the door and said, "Get out of my house. If you do not leave, I will call the police to have you escorted out." For once, Carol listened. She left, but the visit left an ugly feeling hanging over our home. While I was glad she was gone, I could not shake the bitterness of what had just happened. At least now she knew not to mess with us. Hopefully, she would keep her distance moving forward. Update 3. Hi, everyone. I am back because Carol managed to pull something even nastier this time, and I cannot believe she thought she could get away with it. 2 weeks have passed since her unwelcome visit, and we have not heard a peep from her since. Jack and I started to think she had finally moved on and decided to leave us alone. We were wrong. Today, I got a call from my parents. They sounded shaken. Carol had shown up at their house unannounced and unleashed a torrent of insults at them. She called them terrible parents and blamed them for raising what she called a gold-digging, conniving woman. She did not stop there. She had the audacity to tell my mom that if she had spent more time at home raising her kids instead of working odd jobs, maybe we would have turned out better. And, as if that was not enough, she insulted my dad again, mocking his profession and saying it was no surprise his daughters were trash. Hearing my parents describe this scene broke my heart. They were nearly in tears, and I could feel my anger bubbling up with every word. Even as I type this, I am furious just thinking about it. I am currently at work, so I cannot do anything about it right this second, but as soon as I clock out, I am driving straight to Carol's house to give her a piece of my mind. I texted Jack to let him know what happened, but he has not replied yet. He is swamped at work. I do not even want him to come with me, but I wanted to keep him in the loop so he will not be blindsided if Carol tries to twist the story when she inevitably calls him to complain. Update 4. I just got back from Carol's house, and let me tell you, confronting her was one of the most satisfying things I have ever done. When I got there, she opened the door herself, smirking like she was proud of what she had done. That smug expression was all it took for me to lose it. I was already seething, and seeing her act so pleased with herself pushed me over the edge. I shoved past her into the house and asked her point-blank if she had gone to my parents' home and said all those horrible things. She did not even try to deny it. Instead, she smiled and said, "Yes, I did. That was it." I started yelling at her louder than I ever thought I could. I could feel the whole house shake with the force of my anger. "How dare you?" I shouted. Carol actually stumbled back a few steps, completely caught off guard. I suppose she did not expect me to stand up to her like that. I have always been a quiet, soft-spoken person, so this was probably the last thing she expected. Honestly, I even surprised myself. I called her a hypocrite and told her she was a failure as a mother. I said that if she cared even a little about Jack's happiness, she would stop trying to tear us apart. But no, she was too selfish to do that. I went on to say that it was no wonder her husband had passed away when Jack was young. "Living with you must have been worse than whatever illness he had," I spat. That comment finally got to her. She started crying, but I did not stop. I kept yelling until I had nothing left to say. By the time I stormed out, Carol was sobbing on the couch, completely shattered. And honestly, I did not feel bad about it. She had insulted my family and hurt the people I care about the most. She deserved every word I said. But, in the end, that was never going to happen, because Jack and I truly loved each other. We understood what love meant, something Carol could never seem to grasp. I admit, I went low when I told her that I was glad her husband had passed away when Jack was little. I said he probably would not have survived living with someone as cold and controlling as her. I even went as far as to call her worse than whatever illness he had. That was the breaking point. She began to cry. But I was not done yet. My anger had been bottled up for far too long, and I was finally letting it all out. I kept yelling, venting every bit of frustration she had caused me over the years. It felt like it went on forever, but eventually, I ran out of steam. By the time I stopped, Carol was sobbing uncontrollably. And you know what? It was satisfying. She had made me feel worthless, insulted my family, and treated my parents with blatant disrespect. She deserved every word I threw at her. A few minutes after her tears started, I decided I had had enough. I stormed out of her house and drove straight home. About an hour later, Jack came back. He told me he had left work early but went to Carol's house first, thinking I was still there. When he arrived, I had already left, just minutes before. He said the door was ajar, and when he walked in, he saw Carol curled up on the couch, still crying her eyes out. At first, I thought Jack might be upset with me for making his mom cry like that. After all, she rarely showed emotion, crying was almost unheard of for her. But instead of being mad, Jack surprised me. He told me he was proud of me for finally standing up for myself. He said he was glad I was no longer letting anyone, not even his mom, treat me like a doormat. Then he hugged me, and it was one of those long, comforting hugs that reminded me why I married him. After that, Jack apologized for everything Carol had said and done to my parents. He admitted he should have stepped in sooner and promised he would never let her cross the line like that again. Then he told me what happened after I left her house. Jack and Carol had a short, heated conversation, likely their last for a very long time. Jack told her we were done with her. He said he would not tolerate her behavior anymore, and if she tried to interfere in our lives again, we would have no choice but to file a restraining order. Carol, apparently still upset from what I said, repeated everything to Jack, including my harsh comments about his father. She fully expected him to defend her and finally take her side, assuming he would think I had gone too far. But Jack disappointed her yet again. He told her that while my words were harsh, they did not offend him because Carol had said far worse things about my family. In his words, she kind of had this one coming. That only made Carol angrier. She accused Jack of not caring about her and said he was only taking my side because I was pretending to be sweet and innocent. Jack shut that down quickly. He told her the only reason he was on my side was because I was right. He explained that I had never done anything to hurt her or make her feel small. On the contrary, it was she who went out of her way to humiliate me. He reminded her that even when she was confronted about her behavior and given the chance to change, she doubled down and tried to manipulate the situation instead. She had her chances, Jack told her. You cannot act like the victim now, not when you made your choices. With that, Jack walked out of her house, ignoring her desperate pleas for him to come back and leave me. When he got home, he told me, I made my choice, and I do not care about anything else. It was a sweet moment. We hugged again, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like everything was going to be okay. We are continuing with our marriage counseling, and it has been going really well. Now more than ever, we know that we are in this together, no matter what. Jack has my back, and I have his, and that is all I ever really wanted.